The Quantum Gateway's massive energy rings hummed with power as Fleet Admiral Choi Dong-min stepped onto the bridge of the UES Indomitable. His weathered hands gripped the command rail as the ship's engines roared to life, propelling humanity's first war fleet toward an unknown destiny. "All systems green, Admiral," reported his second-in-command, Captain Kong Soo-jin. Her voice carried the tension that every crew member felt. They were about to enter a war that had been raging since before their grandparents were born. The Indomitable led a formation of 50 warships, each one packed with Earth's most deadly weapons. Unlike the elegant alien vessels they'd seen in transmissions, human ships looked like flying fortresses. Angular hulls bristled with railgun batteries, missile pods, and armor plating thick enough to stop plasma beams. "Jump in 3 minutes," announced Navigation Officer Park Jun-ho. Through the viewports, the crew could see the Quantum Gateway's swirling vortex of twisted space-time. It looked like a hungry mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Admiral Choi had fought in Earth's last major conflict 20 years ago. He'd seen what humans could do when pushed to their limits. But this was different. This time, they weren't fighting other humans. They were going up against an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. It's her incoming transmission from Earth. Called Communications Officer Nam Eugene. "President Yoon wants to speak with you." The main screen flickered to life, showing President Yoon Ha-jin in her office, overlooking the rebuilt Seoul skyline. Her expression was grave, but determined. "Admiral, the eyes of humanity are upon you," she said. "Remember that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every species that still believes in freedom." "Understood, Madam President? We won't let you down." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Admiral Choi looked around at his crew. These weren't professional soldiers like the alien species had. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, and shopkeepers who had volunteered to defend their world. That's what made them dangerous. "1 minute to jump," Park announced in the ship's engineering section. Chief Engineer Lee Min-kyun monitored the fusion reactors that powered their weapons. The railguns alone required enough energy to light up a small city. But that was nothing compared to what the aliens were bringing to this fight. "Admiral, we're picking up chatter from the alien fleet," reported Intelligence Officer Shin Da-hai. They single quotes re ... "They're calling us the metal throwers. They don't think our weapons will work against Vorthok bioarmor." A grim smile crossed Admiral Choi's face. "Metal throwers, huh? They're about to learn what happens when you throw metal fast enough." The countdown reached 0. The Quantum Gateway activated, and reality twisted around the human fleet. For a moment that felt like eternity, they existed in a space between dimensions. Then, with a flash of blinding light, they emerged in the Kepler 442 system. What they saw took their breath away. The alien defense fleet stretched across space, like a city of light. Crystalline ships from Arcturus refracted starlight into rainbow patterns. Centaurian vessels moved like living things, their hulls shifting and flowing. Vegan ships appeared to be made of pure energy, barely visible against the starfield. But it was the enemy that truly shocked them. The Vorthok bioships were nightmares made real. Massive creatures of flesh and metal that pulsed with organic life, tentacles the size of city blocks writhed from their hulls. Worst of all, they seemed to bend reality around them, making space itself appear sick and twisted. "My God," whispered Captain Kong. "They're not ships, they're monsters." "All ships, battle stations," Admiral Choi ordered. "Remember your training. We're here to fight, not to admire the view." The alien fleet commander, a being called Zixthera, opened a communication channel. Its voice sounded like crystal chimes. "In a windstorm, human vessels maintain your position behind our battle line. Your primitive weapons are not suitable for this engagement. We will handle the Vorthok." Admiral Choi's jaw tightened. "With respect, Commander, we didn't come here to hide behind your ships. We came here to fight, Admiral, please." The Vorthok. Bioarmor cannot be penetrated by kinetic weapons. Only directed energy can. The transmission was cut short as the battle began. The Vorthok bioships surged forward like a tide of living metal. Their weapons were unlike anything in human experience. Instead of firing projectiles or beams, they seemed to twist reality itself. creating zones where physics stopped working normally. The alien fleet responded with a light show that put Earth's greatest fireworks to shame. Beams of pure energy lanced through space, creating aurora-like displays as they struck the Vorthok vessels. For a moment, it looked like the defenders might hold. Then the horrible truth became clear. The energy weapons were barely scratching the bioships. Creatures absorbed the attacks, their flesh healing almost instantly. Even worse, the Vorthok were beginning to emit some kind of psychic attack that was affecting the alien crews.
Sir.
The other ships are going dark, reported Tactical Officer Kim Woo-sung. The crews are just ... stopping, like they've lost the will to fight. Admiral Choi watched as ship after ship in the alien fleet began to drift helplessly. Whatever the Vorthok were doing, it was shutting down their minds. But the human crews felt nothing. If anything, they seemed more focused than ever. All human vessels, this is Admiral Choi. Ignore the alien commander's orders. We're going in. The 50 human ships broke formation, accelerating past the paralyzed alien fleet. Their railguns began charging, building electromagnetic fields. That would launch tungsten penetrators at incredible speeds. Target the largest bioship, Admiral Choi commanded. Full spread, all guns. The Indomitable's main batteries fired in sequence. 6 tungsten rods, each one accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, streaked toward the massive Vorthok creature. The kinetic energy they carried was equivalent to several nuclear weapons. The bioship scream could be heard across space itself. For the first time in the battle, one of the Vorthok creatures was genuinely hurt. The tungsten penetrators had punched clean through its bioarmor, creating wounds that its regenerative systems couldn't immediately heal. Impossible, came Zixthora's stunned voice over the com. Nothing penetrates Vorthok armor. Metal does, Admiral Choi replied coldly. At sufficient velocity, everything penetrates. The battle turned into a running fight as more human ships opened fire. Nuclear missiles streaked through space, their warheads detonating inside the bioships. Creatures' energy absorption. Systems evolved to handle directed energy weapons, were completely overwhelmed by the raw explosive force. But the most shocking moment came when the Vorthok tried their ultimate weapon. The psychic attack that had paralyzed the alien fleet washed over the human ships like a wave of pure despair. For a moment, the crews experienced visions of Earth burning, their families dying, their species extinct. Then they shook it off and kept fighting. "Sir, why isn't it affecting us?" asked Captain Kang. Admiral Choi smiled grimly. "Because we're human. We've been living with the knowledge that we're going to die since the day we were born. Few alien nightmares aren't going to stop us from doing our job." The Vorthok bioships, confused by their inability to break human morale, began to retreat. It was the first time in over a century that they had been forced to abandon a system they intended to claim. As the human fleet regrouped, the alien crews slowly recovered from their psychic paralysis. The silence on the communication channels was deafening. These ancient species, who had fought the Vorthok for generations, had just watched a group of primitives accomplish what they thought was impossible. "Admiral Choi," came Zixthora's voice, much more respectful now. We underestimated your species. How did you resist their mind control?" "We didn't resist it," Admiral Choi replied. "We just decided it didn't matter. Every human knows that existence is temporary and often meaningless. We've learned to fight anyway." The first engagement was over, but everyone knew it was just the beginning. Word would spread through both the Alliance and the Vorthok Empire. The galaxy had a new player in its ancient war. They fought by very different rules. As the human fleet prepared for the next battle, Admiral Choi looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an empire that had seemed unstoppable was learning to fear. The metal throwers had arrived, and they had brought more than just weapons. They had brought the one thing the galaxy had forgotten how to do: win. The aftermath of the battle left everyone stunned. Commander Park Gen-seo watched from the bridge of the UES Retribution as rescue shuttles moved between the drifting alien ships. The crews inside those vessels had been completely shut down by the Vorthok psychic attack, their minds locked in. Nightmarish visions of galactic destruction. "How long before they recover?" asked Lieutenant Kim Dae-young, monitoring the alien life signs on her sensors. The Arcturian medical officer says it could be ours, Park replied. Their minds aren't built to handle that kind of psychological assault. They've never had to deal with existential terror on that scale. It was a sobering thought. These alien species had achieved incredible technological advancement, but they'd also become soft. Their civilizations had eliminated most forms of suffering, which left them vulnerable to the Vorthok's mental warfare. Humans were different. Every person on Earth grew up knowing they would die. They watched loved ones age and pass away. They dealt with failure, heartbreak, and the crushing weight of meaninglessness that came with truly understanding the universe's size. It had made them stronger. Sir, we're getting reports from the other human ships, reported Communications Officer Lee Harum. The crew of the UES Defiance managed to capture some Vorthok biomatter during the battle. Engineering wants to analyze it. Park nodded. Tell them to be careful. We don't know what that stuff might do to our equipment. But even as he said it, Park felt a thrill of excitement. This was what humans did best. They adapted. While the aliens had spent centuries using the same tactics against the Vorthok, humans were already figuring out how to turn the enemy's own weapons against them. 3 hours later, the alien fleet crews had mostly recovered. The Arcturian commander, Zixthera, requested a meeting with the human leadership. The conference took place aboard the UES Indomitable. In a makeshift meeting room that had been hastily converted from a cargo bay, Admiral Mo Choi sat across from representatives of 12 different species. The aliens were fascinating to look at. Some were crystalline beings that refracted light through their bodies. Others appeared to be made of living energy, and a few looked like they'd stepped out of Earth's ancient mythology. Admiral Choi, Zixthera began, its voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We owe you an apology. We underestimated your species' capabilities. No offense taken, Admiral Choi replied. We're used to being underestimated. It's actually quite useful in combat. The vegan representative, a being of pure light that communicated through color changes, pulsed with what their translator indicated was curiosity. Your weapons are remarkably effective against Vorthok bioarmor. How did you know kinetic force would work when energy weapons failed? Captain Kang, sitting beside the Admiral, answered, We didn't know. We just tried everything we had. That's what humans do. We experiment. We adapt. We find solutions. But the risks, protested the Centaurian delegate, a creature that looked like a cross between a dolphin and a jellyfish. Your tactics could have resulted in total fleet destruction. Better to risk everything than to accept slow defeat, Admiral Choi said simply. We've been watching your war for the past decade through our long-range sensors. You're losing. Your current tactics aren't working. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. These species had been fighting the Vorthok for over a century, and they'd been gradually pushed back system by system. The arrival of humanity represented the first real victory they'd had in decades. What do you propose? Asked the Syrian representative, a being that looked like a walking tree made of metal. We change how we fight, Admiral Choi said. Species have incredible technology, but you're using it defensively. We combine your advanced systems with human tactics. We take the fight to them. Over the next several hours, the human officers shared their tactical assessments. They'd been studying the Vorthok for only a few days, but they'd already identified weaknesses that the aliens had missed. The bioships are living creatures, explained Captain Kong. They have nervous systems, pain responses, and survival instincts. They can be intimidated, confused, and demoralized. Your species have been treating them like machines. But they're also connected to each other, added Commander Park, who had joined the meeting via hologram. We intercepted some of their communications during the battle. They share information instantly across their entire fleet. If we can disrupt that network, we could blind them, finished the Arcturian commander, its crystalline form brightening. With excitement, the humans also shared their analysis of the Vorthok psychic attacks. They're not really reading your minds, explained the Indomitable's chief medical officer, Dr. Yang Minyoung. They're broadcasting fear and despair on specific frequency bands. It's like a psychological weapon, but it has limits. Why doesn't it affect humans? Asked the vegan delegate. Dr. Yang smiled grimly. because humans are already afraid. We live with existential dread every day. We've learned to function despite it, and the Vorthok try to show us visions of meaninglessness. And death? We just think, yeah, so what? We knew that already. The meeting continued into the night cycle, with humans and aliens sharing tactical knowledge. The humans learned about advanced shield systems, energy weapons that could punch through dimensions, propulsion technology that bent space-time itself in return. They shared concepts that were revolutionary to the alien mindset. Combined arms tactics, psychological warfare, and the idea that sometimes the best defense was a good offense. But it was the human approach to casualties that truly shocked the aliens. When asked about acceptable loss ratios, Admiral Choi's answer was simple. Every death is a tragedy, but some tragedies are necessary to prevent greater ones. We'll sacrifice whatever it takes to win. The aliens struggled with this concept. Their civilizations had become so advanced that they'd eliminated most forms of death and suffering. The idea of deliberately accepting casualties for strategic gain was foreign to them. How do you maintain morale when you know you might die? Asked the Centaurian delegate. By remembering what we're fighting for, answered Lieutenant Commander Ka Minyoung, who had lost her brother in the battle. We're not fighting for glory or conquest. We're fighting so our families can live free. That's worth any sacrifice. As the meeting concluded, plans were made for the next phase of the war. The alien fleets would be retrofitted with human-designed kinetic weapons. Human tactical officers would be assigned to alien ships to teach them aggressive combat maneuvers. Importantly, the combined fleet would go on the offensive. Instead of waiting for the Vorthok to attack, they would strike first, hitting enemy staging areas and supply lines. This is a new kind of war, Admiral Choi told the assembled commanders. The Vorthok have been fighting the same battles for a century. They've grown comfortable with their superiority. We're going to show them what happens when prey becomes predator. As the alien representatives returned to their ships, they carried with them more than just new tactical knowledge. They carried hope. For the first time in decades, victory seemed possible. Word of the human victory spread through the galactic communication networks. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had given up hope began to believe again. The species that had been dismissed as primitive had done something no one thought possible. They had made the Vorthok retreat, but in the depths of space, the ancient enemy was also learning. The Vorthok collective consciousness analyzed the battle. Studying these new opponents who seemed immune to their greatest weapon, they began to adapt, to evolve, to prepare for the next encounter. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The war room aboard the massive space station Harmony Base buzzed with activity as officers from dozens of worlds worked side by side. Captain Lim Hae-young stood before a three-dimensional hologram showing the captured Vorthok bioship. Her hands still shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the boarding operation just hours before. The inside was like stepping into a nightmare, she told the assembled intelligence team. The walls were alive, pulsing with veins and organic conduits. But that's not the scary part. The scary part is how well it works. Dr. Kim Sang-wook, the lead xenobiologist, leaned forward with intense curiosity. Tell us about the neural networks you discovered. Lim activated a recording from her helmet camera. The footage showed her team moving through corridors that looked more like the inside of a giant organism than a spaceship. Bioluminescent panels provided eerie blue lighting, while strange organic computers processed information at incredible speeds. They don't use traditional circuits, she explained. Everything is biological. The ship thinks, feels, and learns. When we damaged one section, the rest of the ship actually tried to heal it. It was like fighting a living thing, not a machine. The implications were staggering. While human ships needed crews of hundreds to operate, the Vorthok bioships were essentially single organisms that could function independently. They could repair themselves, adapt to new threats, and even reproduce under the right conditions. Did you manage to take control? Asked Commander Cho Sunjo from the Engineering Corps. Pain Lim replied simply. We figured out that if you hurt it badly enough, the ship goes into a defensive mode. It shuts down non-essential systems and focuses on survival. That gave us the opening we needed. The technique had been brutal but effective. Human boarding parties had used flamethrowers and acid weapons to cause maximum pain to the bioship's nervous system. Once the creature was stunned, they could access its organic computers and extract valuable intelligence. "We found something," Slim continued, her expression growing serious. "These ships aren't just individual creatures. They're all connected to something bigger. A kind of central mind that coordinates everything." Dr. Kim's eyes widened. A hive mind. That would explain their perfect coordination in battle. "More than that," Lim said. "We intercepted some of their communications. They're not just sharing tactical information. They're sharing memories, experiences, even emotions. When we destroyed one bioship, the others actually felt its death." This revelation changed everything. The Vorthok weren't just an advanced alien species. They were a collective consciousness spread across thousands of living ships. Each victory against them wasn't just a tactical win. It was causing actual trauma to their shared mind. Meanwhile, in the training facilities of Luna Base, alien crews were learning to fight like humans. Commander Park Geneseo watched as a Centaurian pilot practiced aggressive attack runs in a flight simulator. "No, no, no," Park shouted into his headset. "You're still flying like you're in a parade. This is combat. Be unpredictable." The Centaurian, a being that resembled a cross between a dolphin and an octopus, struggled with the concept. "But Commander, these maneuvers violate our safety protocols. The risk of collision is. It's acceptable if it means destroying the enemy," Park finished. "Look, I know this goes against everything you've been taught. But your safe, predictable flying is exactly why you've been losing this war. It was a common problem. The alien species had become so advanced that they'd eliminated most forms of risk from their societies. Their military tactics reflected this. Everything was careful, calculated, and safe. Human tactics were the opposite, chaotic, dangerous, and wildly unpredictable. "Watch this," Park said, taking control of the simulator. His ship dove straight toward an enemy biovessel, weapons blazing. At the last second, he pulled into a spiral that would have killed most alien pilots from the G-forces alone. The maneuver put him in the perfect position to target the bioship's vulnerable neural cluster. See? Sometimes the most dangerous path is the only one that leads to victory. The Centaurian pilot practiced the maneuver again, this time with more aggression. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Across the training facility, similar scenes were playing out as human instructors taught alien crews to think like predators. Instead of prey, in the research labs, human scientists were making breakthrough discoveries about Vorthok technology. Dr. Yang Minyoung led a team studying captured bioarmor samples, trying to understand how the organic material could be so resilient. "It's incredible," she told her assistant, Lieutenant Lee Soo-jin. "This stuff can adapt to different types of damage in real time. Energy weapons actually make it stronger by feeding it power. But kinetic impact disrupts its cellular structure faster than it can adapt. So that's why our railguns work so well," Lee observed. "Exactly. And look at this." Dr. Yang pointed to a microscopic image of the bioarmor. "See these neural pathways? They're not just for healing, they're for communication. Every piece of Vorthok technology is connected to every other piece." The discovery led to a new weapon. Concept: neural disruptors. If they could jam the communication pathways in Vorthok biotechnology, they could essentially lobotomize the enemy ships, turning them from intelligent organisms into mindless husks. Back on the front lines, the effects of human tactics were becoming clear. Commander Yoon Jae-soon commanded a mixed fleet of human and alien vessels in the Proxima sector, where they were hunting down Vorthok supply convoys. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported his tactical officer. 3 bioships, heading for the asteroid belt. Standard intercept," Yoon ordered. "Arcturian ships hit them with energy weapons first. Make them think it's a normal engagement. Human ships, wait for my signal." The battle began as the aliens expected. The Arcturian vessels opened fire with their beautiful energy beams, creating the usual light show. The Vorthok bioships absorbed the attacks and began their standard counterattack pattern. Now, Yoon commanded. The human ships appeared from behind the asteroids, their railguns already charged. They fired in perfect coordination, turning the largest bioship into a cloud of organic debris in seconds. The other two Vorthok vessels tried to retreat but found their escape route blocked by more human ships that had been lying in wait. "This is what we call a trap," Yoon said over the comm as his ships finished off the remaining enemies. "Something your species might want to learn." The psychological impact on the Vorthok was becoming evident. For the first time in their collective memory, they were experiencing fear. Their communications, intercepted by human intelligence, showed growing panic within their ranks. The Chaos Bringers adapt too quickly. Read one decoded message. Our strategies fail before they can be implemented. We cannot predict their movements. Another transmission was even more revealing. Request permission to withdraw from Sector 7. The metal throwers cause pain to the collective mind. The dead ships scream in our consciousness. Admiral Choi, reviewing these reports aboard the Indomitable, felt a grim satisfaction. "They're learning what it feels like to be afraid," he told his staff. "For creatures that have dominated the galaxy for a century, fear is a new and terrible experience." The war was changing, and humanity was driving that change. They had taken an ancient conflict and turned it into something new, not just a battle for territory, but a clash between different ways of thinking about existence itself. The aliens fought to preserve, humans fought to win. And for the first time in galactic history, it looked like winning was actually possible. The assembly point for the final assault was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. In the empty space between star systems, over 3,000 warships from 19 different species gathered in formations that stretched across millions of kilometers. Captain No Hyun-suk stood at the observation deck of the UES Thunder, watching as more ships arrived through quantum gateways every hour. "It's incredible," said Lieutenant Jang Min-ho, staring at the massive fleet. "I never thought I'd see Arcurian crystal ships fighting alongside vegan energy beings in human metal boxes." "Don't forget the Centaurian biovessels," added Commander Beek Sujin. 6 months ago, they wouldn't even talk to us. Now they're asking for lessons in ramming tactics. The transformation had been remarkable. Species that had been enemies for millennia were now working together, united by their shared hatred of the Vorthok and their newfound respect for human military doctrine. The elegant alien ships had been retrofitted with human-designed weapons, their crews trained in aggressive combat maneuvers that would have horrified their ancestors. Admiral Yu moved between the ships in his personal shuttle, conducting final inspections and briefings. Each vessel represented not just military power, but the hopes of entire civilizations. The pressure was enormous, but he'd learned to channel that pressure into focus. "Admiral, incoming priority transmission from the reconnaissance fleet," reported his aide, Ensign Park Young-Jun. The message came from Commander Lee So-young, whose stealth ships had been monitoring the Vorthok core systems for weeks. Her face appeared on the screen, and her expression was grim. "Sir, you need to see this. The Vorthok aren't just merging their ships anymore. They're converting entire planets into components of this final convergence thing." Tactical display showed images that defied comprehension. Whole worlds had been transformed into massive organs, their surfaces covered with biomechanical structures that pulsed with alien life. Space stations had grown into nervous systems, while asteroid belts had been converted into circulatory networks. "They're building a living god," Lee continued. "Something so large it could destroy star systems just by moving through them. Our intelligence estimates it'll be larger than some moons when completed." Admiral Yu studied the data, his mind racing through tactical possibilities. Conventional weapons would be useless against something that size. Even nuclear weapons would be like bee stings against a giant. "How's the convergence process working?" he asked. "That's the good news," Lee replied. "It's incredibly complex. They need to synchronize billions of biomechanical components across multiple star systems. If we can disrupt the process at the right moment, we might be able to turn their greatest weapon into their biggest weakness." "Admiral, you finished." The plan that emerged was typically human in its audacity. Instead of trying to destroy the final convergence, they would sabotage it during the most critical phase of the merger. The biomechanical components would be connected but not yet stable, making the entire structure vulnerable to cascading. System failures. It's insane, admitted Dr. Shin Yoon-kyung, the fleet's chief xenobiologist. We're talking about coordinated strikes across 12 star systems timed to the microsecond. One mistake, and the whole plan fails. And we won't make mistakes, Admiral, you said simply. We've come too far to fail now. The fleet divided into task forces, each one assigned to a specific target system. The human ships would spearhead the most dangerous missions, while alien vessels provided support and handled secondary objectives. It was a plan that required perfect coordination between species that had barely known each other a year ago. Captain Kim Tae-ho commanded the 5th Strike Group, whose target was the biomechanical processing center in the Altair system. His ships included human destroyers, Arcturian energy cruisers, and Centaurian biofighters, a combination that would have been impossible to imagine before the war. Remember, timing is everything, he told his captains over the comm. We hit fast, hit hard, and get out before the Vorthok can respond. If we're still there when the other strikes begin, we'll be caught in the feedback loop. The attack began simultaneously across all 12 target systems. Human ships emerged from Quantum Jump with their railguns already charged, striking at the biomechanical nerve centers with devastating precision. The Vorthok, caught off guard by the coordinated assault, struggled to mount an effective defense. Target destroyed, reported Commander Oh Seung-min from the UES Hammer. The processing node is down. Similar reports came in from across the fleet, and the alien crews, trained in human tactics, pressed their attacks with a ferocity that surprised even themselves. Arcturian ships that had once fought like dancers now struck like hammers. Vegan energy beings channeled their light into weapons of terrible destruction. But the Vorthok fought back with the desperation of a species facing extinction. Bioships that had been dormant for centuries awakened, their ancient minds filled with rage and hunger. The space around each target system became a nightmare of organic weapons and twisted reality. We're taking heavy casualties, reported Captain Lee Jinwoo from the 3rd Battle Group, but the mission is succeeding. Convergence process is destabilizing. On the main tactical display, Admiral, you watched as the Vorthok's final convergence began to collapse. The biomechanical connections between star systems flickered and failed. Planets that had been converted into living organs began to convulse and die. All units, begin Phase 2, he ordered. Hit the core systems now, while they're still reeling. The final assault was led by the human heavy battle groups, their ships loaded with every nuclear weapon Earth could produce. They struck at the heart of the Vorthok Empire, targeting the ancient biomechanical structures that had coordinated the alien species for millennia. Commander Park Joon-ho piloted his fighter through the organic maze of a Vorthok command structure, dodging tentacles the size of skyscrapers, while his wingman, an Arcturian crystal being, provided covering fire with energy beams. This place is like flying through someone's nightmare, he muttered, targeting a cluster of neural nodes with his micronukes. The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the entire structure. Similar attacks throughout the core systems began to have a cumulative effect. Vorthok collective consciousness, stretched across thousands of bioships and converted worlds, began to fragment and collapse. Sir, we're detecting massive neural feedback throughout the Vorthok network, reported the fleet's intelligence officer. Their collective mind is breaking apart. Individual bioships, cut off from the guiding intelligence that had controlled them for centuries, began to behave erratically. Some attacked their own allies. Others simply shut down completely. A few tried to flee, found themselves trapped by human pursuit squadrons. The battle raged for 18 hours across 12 star systems. When it finally ended, the Vorthok Empire lay in ruins. Their biomechanical infrastructure was destroyed, their collective consciousness shattered, and their surviving ships scattered to the cosmic winds. All units, cease fire, Admiral, you ordered. The Vorthok Empire is finished. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in over a century, the galaxy was at peace. The ancient enemy that had terrorized countless worlds was finally defeated, not by superior technology or ancient wisdom, but by the simple human refusal to accept defeat as rescue. Operations began, and the fleet regrouped. Word spread across the galaxy. The war was over. Humanity had led the charge that ended a century of terror, teaching the galaxy's ancient species what it meant to fight with everything you had. The tide hadn't just turned. It had become a tsunami that swept away the galaxy's greatest threat forever. The explosion that ended the Vorthok Empire lit up the galactic core like a second sun. Commander Kim Woo-bin watched from the bridge of his rescue ship as debris from the massive bioconstruct drifted through space like cosmic snowflakes. Each piece had once been part of the most terrifying weapon ever created, but now they were just lifeless chunks of organic metal. "Any word from Admiral Choi?" asked Lieutenant Sun Yuri, scanning the communication frequencies for any sign of survivors. "Nothing yet," Kim replied, though he kept his voice steady for the crew. The truth was, nobody expected survivors from that final assault. The human ships had flown straight into the heart of the Vorthok monster and detonated enough nuclear weapons to crack a planet. Should have been a suicide mission then. Through the static and interference came a weak but unmistakable signal. "This is Admiral Choi aboard the Indomitable. We're hurt bad, but we're still breathing. Send rescue teams to coordinate 77 Alpha. Somebody get me a damage report on the rest of the fleet." The bridge erupted in cheers. Somehow impossibly, Admiral Choi and his flagship had survived the explosion that had killed a god. As rescue operations began, the true scope of the miracle became clear. Of the 300 human ships that had made the final assault, nearly half had somehow made it through the blast. "How?" asked Captain Onjamin when his rescue team reached the Indomitable. The ship was a twisted wreck, barely held together by emergency hole patches and prayers. But it was still flying. Admiral Choi, his uniform torn and his face covered in soot, managed a tired smile. "Human engineering. We build our ships to take a beating and keep going. Plus we had a little help from our alien friends." It turned out that the Arcturian crystal ships had formed a protective barrier around the human fleet at the moment of detonation, their energy shields absorbing just enough of the blast to keep the assault ships from being completely vaporized. It was a sacrifice that cost them dozens of vessels, but it had ensured that humanity's heroes lived to see their victory. As the rescue operations continued, reports started coming in from across the galaxy. The death of the final convergence had triggered a massive psychic shockwave that affected every Vorthok bioship in existence. Some had simply shut down, their crews going into catatonic states. Others had turned on each other in confusion and madness. A few had even surrendered, begging for mercy from the species they had terrorized for over a century. "We're getting reports from the Outer Rim," announced Communications Officer Park Dasam from the Fleet Command Center. "Vorthok forces are retreating from every occupied system. It's like they've all lost the will to fight." Commander Lee So-young, whose reconnaissance squadrons had been monitoring enemy movements, provided the explanation. "The collective consciousness is broken. Without the central intelligence coordinating them, the individual bioships are just confused animals. They're scared and alone for the first time in their existence." The psychological implications were staggering. The Vorthok had been a hive mind for so long that individual thought was almost impossible for them. Suddenly cut off from their collective identity, they were experiencing something like a species-wide mental breakdown. "What do we do with them?" asked Admiral Yu during an emergency council meeting. The question was more complex than it seemed. The Vorthok had committed unspeakable atrocities across the galaxy, but they were also, in many ways, victims of their own collective consciousness. "We offer them a choice," suggested Dr. Shin Young-kyung, who had been studying Vorthok psychology. "Integration or isolation. They can learn to live as individuals among the galactic community, or they can be relocated to uninhabited systems where they won't threaten anyone." It was a typically human solution, pragmatic, merciful, but firm. The alien species were amazed by this approach. Many of them wanted complete extermination of the Vorthok, but the humans argued for a more nuanced response. "They're not evil," Admiral Choi explained to the Galactic Council. They're just different. Their collective consciousness made them into something monstrous, but individually, they might be capable of change. The rehabilitation program that followed became another example of human innovation. Volunteer crews from Earth worked with captured Vorthok bioships, helping their crews learn to think and act as individuals. It was dangerous work. Many of the aliens were still mentally unstable, but it gradually produced results. The first Vorthok to successfully integrate into galactic society was a being that chose the name Solo, a reference to its newfound individuality, became an advocate for other reformed Vorthok, helping them adapt to life without the collective consciousness. It is strange, Solo explained to a gathering of species representatives, to think only for oneself, to make decisions without the guidance of the many mind. But also, liberating. For the first time, I can choose my own path. Meanwhile, the human influence on galactic civilization continued to grow. Military academies across known space began teaching human doctrine as standard curriculum. The aggressive tactics, adaptability, and willingness to take risks that had won the war became the new model for galactic defense. But it wasn't just military thinking that changed. Human concepts of individual freedom, democratic decision-making, and technological innovation began spreading through alien societies. Species that had remained static for millennia suddenly began experiencing rapid social and technological advancement. "They've given us more than victory," observed Fleet Commander Zixthera during a diplomatic meeting. "They've given us the courage to change, to grow, to become more than we were." The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Some alien species struggled with human concepts of acceptable risk and individual responsibility. Others found human democratic principles chaotic and inefficient compared to their traditional hierarchies. Captain Nohyan Zook, now serving as a cultural liaison officer, spent his days helping alien civilizations adapt human innovations to their own societies. "The key," he explained to a group of Centaurian leaders, "is not to copy everything we do, but to understand the principles behind it. Individual freedom, technological innovation, and the willingness to take calculated risks. These aren't just human traits. They're survival strategies that any species can learn." 5 years after the end of the war, the galaxy was almost unrecognizable. Trade networks that had been stagnant for centuries suddenly flourished as species began exchanging ideas as well as goods. Technological advancement accelerated as the human practice of rapid prototyping and experimental design spread to other worlds. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned to hope again. The ancient fear that had dominated interstellar relations, the terror of the Vorthok Empire, was gone. In its place was something new, the excitement of unlimited possibilities. "We came to this war as the youngest species in the galaxy," Admiral Choi reflected during a ceremony marking the 5th anniversary of victory. "We were called primitive, inexperienced, and reckless. Maybe we were all of those things. But we were also something else. We were free. Free to think new thoughts, try new approaches, and refuse to accept defeat." The ceremony took place on Harmony Station, built in the ruins of the Vorthak's former capital. Representatives from every species in the galaxy attended, including several reformed Vorthok, who now served as peaceful citizens of the galactic community. "The war is over," Admiral Choi continued, "but our work is just beginning. We've shown the galaxy what's possible when free beings stand together. Now we must build a future worthy of the sacrifices that brought us here." As the ceremony ended, and beings from dozens of worlds mingled together in celebration, one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had not just won a war, it sparked a revolution that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The age of fear was over. The age of human influence had begun, and with it, an era of possibilities that the galaxy had never dared to imagine.